Welcome to GreenBiz Studio. I'm John Davies, Senior Vice President for GreenBiz, and I'm joined today by Karina Funk, Portfolio Manager and Chair of Sustainable Investing for Brown Advisory. Welcome, Karina.
Thank you, John. Great to be here.
Tell us about your role at Brown Advisory.
Well, at Brown Advisory, I and my co-manager, we've been running the large cap sustainable growth strategy for over 11 years. And since the beginning, we always knew that a sustainability lens just makes us better long-term investors. The sustainability research that we do, it just helps us turn over more rocks, look at more information to answer the basic questions. How does this company make money? Do we want to own it for the long term? Does it have an ability to thrive over a full market cycle? And water risk for us, given the content of this segment, it fits squarely within that sustainability lens. And at minimum, it helps us understand the physical, the operational, the regulatory, and the reputational risks having to do with water that could very much impact or even impair a company's financials.
Yeah, I wanted to drill into the water risk part. So what do you think investors get wrong about water risk, or, what were their misconceptions?
Well, if you think about how water is just so critical for every company, not to mention individuals, but in every sector and so much of our economic activity, and yet it's a risk that's not easily monetized. So I'll mention three important implications. The first is that water risk actually does exist in every sector of the economy. It's not just about the biggest users of water. I mean, food and beverage companies, yes, agricultural, industrial businesses, they are the biggest users of water, but think about other areas of the economy, starting with healthcare. As a friend of mine in the industry says, the CEO, the former CEO of Ecolab, you can't very well fight a pandemic if you can't wash your hands. Or think about in technology and cloud computing, these data centers, semiconductor manufacturing, they are enormous users and some of very high purity water, and they need to be vigilant of the downside risks of water mismanagement. Second, water scarcity affects us today, not in some distant future and somewhere else. The UN predicts that by 2030, up to only 60% of our freshwater demands will be met. That's within the decade, but it's easy to discount that challenge, particularly because for a lot of us, water can seem really just cheap and abundant. And this leads to not just environmental, but think about the massive social challenges that are connected to water stress today, as the people of Flint, Michigan can attest to, or the millions of Americans that routinely deal with water curtailment or compromised sanitation and water treatment facilities. And the final thing I'll say is that one company, one community, one investor cannot solve or engineer their way out of water stress. It's a very much a shared resource. So conserving a common good requires collaboration, and collaboration takes time. So companies need to be starting now.
Yeah, I mean, water risk just seems like the front edge of climate risk in general. So how do we start solving for them? Are there good practices, tools, technologies that you also look at in your research?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer by example. One company in our portfolio that we've owned for over a decade, it's Ecolab, and I'll also mention, how our sustainability research helps us be better investors. I mean, this is a company that's returned high teens on a compound annual basis for over a decade to shareholders. And so it's also an example of how companies can solve for water scarcity because of their impact on customers. So it's not just about your own operations. You can help customers be more productive, more efficient. So this company provides cleaning and sanitation services for a wide variety of industries. And so if you're using their cooling tower technology or their dishware washing equipment, when we all start going to restaurants again, you're using less water. You're using less energy to transport and to heat that water. And there's that link, John, that you mentioned between water and climate change, and energy use. I mean, we're likely to experience climate change in part through water stress. But if you can do that for your customers, help customers use less and be more productive and more efficient and save money in the meantime, that is a compelling value proposition day in and day out, and a growth driver for any company.
So earlier you mentioned that companies can't do this alone and that there needs to be more collaboration. Do you have some examples of what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah, with actually with that company and with S&P Global and Microsoft and some nonprofits, including the World Resources Institute. That's a collaboration that has recently launched what they call the Smart Water Navigator. It helps facilities around the world to understand, given their exact location, their water usage, any operational data that they can provide, and the water basins in their area. What's that gap between the low cost that we pay for water today and the true cost of water, given perhaps scarcity and accessibility issues? And Microsoft, that's also in our portfolio, it it's not only helped develop that tool, which clearly takes a collaborative process, given all the data, um, but they've used it to come up with a risk-adjusted price for water in some of their operations. And by the way, Microsoft has done this before. They were early in instituting an internal carbon tax in their own operations, and that seeming constraint of a carbon tax has actually led to cost savings and helped them innovate energy efficient solutions. So I would expect, and by the way, that saves them millions of dollars a year. So I would expect the same penetration of innovation and collaboration and cost savings as we get better with with data around water.
So just wrapping up, how do you think investors should be incorporating water risk into their thinking?
Well, the good news is that there are solutions, and these solutions, yeah, as I pointed out before, actually just may be very compelling investment opportunities. A view on water risk, for example, can help you find, at minimum, the more obvious long-term candidate. I mean, would you rather invest in the company that has a supply chain that's resilient to water risk or not? Would you rather own the semiconductor company that is a laggard in liters of water consumed per chip, or the one that's more efficient? And if only some forward-looking companies are putting an appropriate price on water, that doesn't solve the problem, right, for themselves and for all the stakeholders around the water basin. So investors may really wish to understand if companies are actually treating water as a valued asset and sort of flipping the script. It's not just a risk, but let's treat it as a valued asset that is obviously mission critical. So the good news is that we have solutions today, including valuable data that can help us all manage water use and in watersheds. So, water is definitely a global problem, but we do have local solutions.
Thanks. Well, congratulations on the performance of your portfolio. I was joined today by Karina Funk, Portfolio Manager and Chair of Sustainable Investing for Brown Advisory. Thanks, Karina.
Thank you, John.